webinar series organized by Manav Human Atlas Initiative. Myself, Dr. Shailesh Kumar, moderator of today's talk. As you all know, that total allotted time for webinar is 1 hour, out of which the talk will be of nearly 40 to 45 minutes. Thereafter, we will have a question answer session of about 15 minutes. So I request all participants to use Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen to put your queries. I repeat again, to use only Q&A tab for putting your queries. You can put your queries in between the talk, which will be addressed by the speaker during the question answer session after the talk. So now I would like to introduce Dr. Gitanjali Yadav, speaker of today's talk. Dr. Gitanjali Yadav is currently working as a lecturer at University of Cambridge, and she is also scientist at National Institute of Plant Genome Research, NIPGR, New Delhi. She is the one of the first appointees of joint deputation program between India and UK, where she divides her time between two countries for teaching and research. She is an expert in genomics and structural bioinformatics, which is with application in food security and conservation. So, and Dr. Yadav has received several awards, including Hamid Fellowship from the University of Cambridge, Exceptional Talent Award from Royal Society of London, INSA Mental, and the Women Excellence Award from SIR. She has a diverse educational background with PhD in immunology from NII Delhi, as master's degree in biomedical research, and graduated in botany from University of Delhi. Dr. Yadav is actively promoting science as a way of life to students in schools and colleges, especially from rural India.
Thank you, Shailesh, and thank you everybody at the team, Manav, Preeti, Gayatri, and Dhara for helping me with the preparation for this webinar today. I'm really glad to be speaking to the students today about data science, AI, and machine learning. This is a topic that not many of us, I mean, all of us know about it, but not many of us have the basic grasp of the subject. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time to wrap your head around what it is ultimately. So what I intend to do today is to give an introduction, but alongside of the introduction, I also intend to give you certain snippets to help you start out with it. You know, learning something new is one thing. Listening to another speaker constantly blubber about a topic is another thing. And dipping your fingers into some new science is a third thing altogether. And what's important is for you to be able to take away today the idea that you can indeed dip your fingers into this mush called machine learning, and that it is not impossible. It is not just that the heads of Google and the heads of data science at Google and Facebook do it. Everybody can do it, and Indian students are particularly well at learning new things and picking up new stuff and doing doing science in new ways. So with that, I would like to, of course, thank you, Shailesh, for the introduction. Getting along, I think I'll try to share my slides, and just let me know once if you can see my slides clearly. Okay, share screen. Can you see?
It's visible, yeah.
I don't want any extra space being taken up by myself on the screen there. Right, so then we're going to make a full screen. Do you see full screen with just my slides?
Yes, yes.
Perfect. So this talk is about an introduction to AI and machine learning, particularly from the point of view of biologists. Now, I didn't initially take an idea about whether or not all of us are biologists here in this room. Generally, when I give a talk standing at the podium and speaking to a group of students, I mean, before the lockdown, we all used to know where we are going. I'm at ISO Pune today, so I know it's students. I'm at Kodaikanal today, so I know it's students plus a couple of others. I'm at a university, so I know that there might be some teachers. It's a little bit difficult for me to gauge that currently, presently in this scenario, but from the information that I've got from Manav team organizers, I have the idea that most of you are students. Some of you are doing your graduation, but there are also postgraduates and potentially PhD students in the group. And therefore, I'm going to be trying to remain today in a very equivalent state of mind. Just a second, you see my second slide now. So slide changes are all right? Are they visible, Dhara?
Yes.
Yes.
I won't disturb you again. I'm going to just, the first change is what matters usually. If the first change is okay, then everything is okay. I remember one of my webinars where I went on to the 18th slide and was saying ki laser pointer left mein jo dikha raha hai wo ye hai, and then somebody said, okay, we just have your front page and we only see your picture on the front page. So they hadn't seen the past 17 slides. Now that I know you can see both of them, this page is just about me. But more importantly, what I want to be able to say here is that I have, you see my screen. I have a PhD position open. I'm very interested today for those of you who are postgraduates who might even remotely be interested in joining me for a PhD to please consider doing that. The PhD is not going to be a pure Cambridge PhD. It's going to be an India-UK PhD because I'm a DBT Cambridge lecturer and you will be a DBT Cambridge student in the same sense. So you would be working in India and in the UK as I do all the time. So this is my group in UK, and on the left side is my group in India. And Shailesh has already told you about my parallel life on both continents. And he's told you that if you need to join me, you need to join me on Twitter at JillyNV. Okay, before we begin, I need to get aside the idea of being able to, why I'm doing all of this and what else I'm doing just apart from talking to you, and why data science and machine learning is important. So first of all, there is this critical need for data science and data scientists in the next years, in the next 50 years. If I think about all of biology, it can be summed into one word, and that one word is integration. You will no longer be sitting in your little labs with your little four walls, with your little test tube in your hand, because there is no such thing anymore. All of science is now integration, transdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary studies. Already, of course, because of the past 6 months of lockdown, most of you are spending more time on the computer and the internet than you ever did before. But those of you like me who did already spend a lot of time on the computer and the internet to generate and describe our data, you would now realize that there is no point generating data, looking at your experiments unless and until, or there's no point analyzing your own experiment or your results in isolation, unless and until you can find other people's data which is relevant for comparison to yours, and analyze your data and find existing knowledge in the world, in your field, and relate it to your results, and then compare all of that into the, add all of that into the current body of knowledge before publishing it to the world. It doesn't make sense. And therefore, integration for tomorrow is the only thing to do. And you can't do integration sitting in a lab. You have to know data science. You have to be able to analyze, understand, and extrapolate information, find patterns in your data. All of that is called data science. So we particularly need data scientists in the country globally, but more so in this country, where a lot of us think that computer science scientists are a different class of people and biologists are a different class of people. And there are a couple of those students who know both a little bit, but they are like jack of all trades, and they therefore are sort of okay, but not the best. You're completely wrong. We data scientists right now are the only ones who get to wrap their head around any concept going on around you, including the pandemic. And data scientists are what we need, and data scientists are what you need to become as soon as possible, whatever area of science you might be in, whether you're studying botany, whether you're studying zoology, chemistry, mathematics, you need to get to become a data science ASAP. And my favorite, of course, when you want to do data science, and I'll come back to this later, my favorite theme for you is to start with R. I think you need to absolutely, the power of data analysis that comes with R is unmatchable with anything else under the sun. And the fact that it's free is good for you. So if you need to start with data science, start with R and get your data skills in R. I'm already doing this. There's a lot of training that we are imparting at the Cambridge Bioinformatics Training Facility for students from all walks of life, not just students, even people from outside who are interested in taking these courses are more than welcome to join us at the Cambridge Bioinformatics Training Facility. I have myself been taking a lot of these courses in the past couple of months, but this is the general plan, or this is the general, how should I put it? It is the map of the kind of trainings we are providing. And this is a kind of, this also gives an idea about the kind of core and specialized skills you need to have in data science. So we're doing a lot of courses, programming courses and R courses, statistics. So the kind of courses that I am doing are, I'm going to try and map them onto this screen. This we're doing next week, this we did last week. Today I'm going to give you a short flavor of this one, but we're doing machine learning in R as well as Python. And I'm not a Python expert, but I like R. And of course, Introduction to Unix, which I've been doing for more than 15 years. And then indeed, we have RNA-seq, ChIP-seq, Stats Bootcamp, which we finished last month, last week, and so on. So these are things that are extremely important for many of you. And therefore, even if you're planning, you know, where do I begin? What do I start out to do? The first thing you need to get to do is introduce yourself to the topic or the coding language that you want to pick up. It could be Python, it could be Unix shell scripting, it could be Fortran, as I began with 15 years ago, or it could be R, as I keep telling my students and friends and everybody that I can catch hold of and who cares to listen. R is the thing for you. And of course, these are my own protocols from home series. Shailesh mentioned it, but I think the more you amplify your message, the more it amplifies. And therefore, I can never stop chattering about it. It's extremely important for students to pick up new skills. You're sitting at home. Netflix is a good thing. Watch it as much as you can. But you know, one gets tired of binge watching also. So at that time, maybe it might be interesting to learn and pick up a new skill that might be something you can put into your pocket or a feather for you. For the last couple of months, for the last 6 months, I've been doing short courses on the internet to teach students and teachers and whoever cares to listen about what biological networks are and how to visualize your data as a network. I've done this in India. I've also done this with the help of the Bioinformatics Training Facility. Some of you may have listened to or attended some of my courses, but in case you haven't, to restart them in November. So these are courses on genomics, co-expression data analysis, identifying network motifs. My own specialization is ML and network science. So network perturbations, machine learning, of course, which is happening today, where I'm going to give you an intro to the basic concepts and provide a couple of case studies, hopefully, if there is time. And then, of course, basic bioinformatics, which is happening at the end of this month or the first week of. So what happens is usually for all of these courses, I find that every time I talk about them, students need to know when it's happening and how to register. So the thing is that for many of these courses, because there is no single portal where I can say, okay, all of my courses are listed here. These happen in collaboration with other partners. I've had a good interaction yesterday with the Manav team, similarly with other, Tigris program, also Cambridge. And so things work out by and by. And quite often a week before or 10 days before I give a talk, I know the date. And at that time, I update the information on my Twitter ID. And that is why I specially requested Shailesh to announce for you, if possibly, if possible, number one, join Twitter. Number two, join me on Twitter, and I'm at JillyNV. And even if right now I may tell you this is September 30 when I'm going to be talking about basic bioinformatics, it may be October 2nd, but you will get to know only through my Twitter account, or you may also find out through the organizers. In this case, the organizers are the Department of Science and Technology, Government of Rajasthan. If you can find them on Twitter to bhul jao. If you can find them somewhere, that would be great. Otherwise, I'm always around. And then, of course, data skills in R. These are longer courses, and these courses I currently, I'm doing these through the Cambridge Bioinformatics facility because we have a large infrastructure. But I'd like to be able to run them here in India also with the help from DBT or DST, or let's hope Manav. So with that, we come to machine learning. And while you're doing this, I want all of you to please, for those of you who are listening and for those of you who have a device at their hand, at your access, please type www.menti.com. It's going to ask you for a passcode. You insert that code that's written on this slide. It's called 30, 85, 28, and 6. Let's see if I get some answers. So the question I'm asking is, what comes to your mind when somebody says machine learning? And you can type anything that comes to your mind, of course. So I'm going to be looking at what I've got, and I'm going to close this this voting poll very soon. So start answering. Okay, somebody says Python, automation, statistics. Let's have some more answers. All you have to do is type www.menti.com as a URL into your device. It could be your phone, it could be your laptop or desktop, and then insert the code 30, 85, 28, and 6. Okay, let's see what we have.
Yes,
This is a word cloud for what people who are listening to me today are seeing. So you hear, when you think about machine learning, you think about data analysis, coding, programming, artificial intelligence, neural networks, pattern recognition. Very nice. There's lots of it. I don't see a lot of fun stuff that you can think of. I don't see anybody saying, I see my shopping mall there. I don't see anybody saying, I see movies and new movies happening or movie reviews. So a lot of you connect automatically hardcore mathematics and programming and automation with machine learning. And there's a large number of you who understand Python as this. I also don't see much of R, which is again somewhere that I think you're wrong, but it's quite interesting. And if so AI is all around us. Machine learning is happening all around us all the time. And with this particular slide, I'd like to say these smaller bits, some of these smaller bits, they make me wonder, AI is happening all the time. ML is happening all the time. There are things that you think of that your device knows. Have you realized that your phone is constantly learning about you? And particularly those of you who have the iPhone, your Siri knows you very, very well. Alexa knows you as well if you're using Amazon. And what I'm seeing, especially during the COVID pandemic, is how we are seeing a transformation in front of us, which is driven essentially by AI and machine learning. So have you, all of us, a lot of us are students, but I know a lot of students who are independent and staying alone in these days. Either you're at home or in your hostel, but you're living on your own and you're managing life on your own. Don't you do your grocery shopping online? So when you do your grocery shopping, me, for example, I live in a joint family. I have my in-laws and grand-in-laws living with us, and my grandmother-in-law, she's the matriarch of the family, and she used to, before the lockdown, Mutashi we call her, she used to know exactly what to buy, which brand of atta and which brand of dal will come. I am clueless, and your generation, the students' generation, would potentially be more clueless than I've ever been. My mother-in-law also knows quite a few good brands for getting the right oils, getting the right pulses and stuff like that. But what happened during the lockdown? During the lockdown, poor people, they're not so good with digital tech, which me and my husband, we're pretty neat at it. So what we do is now we just open our phones, we log into Amazon or into Big Basket, and we put the order there. But lately, I've been thinking about how interesting it is that we are no longer going to the घर के corner की किराने की दुकान and asking the uncle ji कि ये वाला आटा और ये वाला दे दीजिए, whatever mommy wrote on the textbook I used to send the driver or sometimes get it myself. Now, because it's happening on Amazon, Amazon gives me top hits. And guess what? Amazon knows that I'm going to choose the hit or the top hit which says delivered this afternoon or delivered tomorrow. Because what matters is on my dining table this morning, the cereal finished and I want tomorrow morning cereal to be there tomorrow morning. So what I need is somebody who can provide it tonight. That neighborhood kirane ka store is therefore so out of it. And they, poor people, they initially, these shopkeepers, they called us at home, we called them and we tried to stay connected with them. And they said, ki madam, hum ghar pe pahuncha denge, which means that we can deliver at your house. But they don't have the manpower. They don't have the boys who used to run around for them anymore. And therefore, whether you want it or not, you're now more and more dependent on online shopping. And online shopping, I don't see the same brand of atta which I used to get earlier, because now, do you know what brand of pulse you eat? Do you know what brand of let's say sesame oil that you get for your household? Those brands, the ones that we used to get earlier, are now gone. What you get is new brands such as the big basket brands or the Amazon pantry brands which can come tonight. And this is entirely an AI ML based new world which we are all dependent on and which we can't escape out of anymore, I think. And I think in the long run, it's not a very good thing for India. But again, I'm digressing. So what I'm saying is AI is everywhere. It's not just in the math, in the Python. It's happening everywhere. And can you see my slides now? New share, perfect. So back to the full screen. Most of you who think that AI is something out there or ML, machine learning is something out there, you're mistaken. It's in your hand right now. That is the only message I wanted you to get. So machine learning is not just about hi-fi things like self-driving cars and being able to diagnose cancer from biopsy slides. It's also about weather prediction when you wake up in the morning and you decide, decide whether or not this weekend or today you're going to go out, what time you'll go to work and come back. Weather prediction, space, face and speech recognition, the Google Translator that you're using all the time, stock trading, of course, recognizing species around you and everything else. What I spent time was on the Amazon customer behavior, but again, it's something that's tightly competing with the big basket. So my husband is a big basket premium customer. I'm an Amazon Prime customer, and both of us, the kind of issues we see, the kind of fight these two things have. Sometimes he orders the same thing and it is ready to be delivered by the afternoon. Amazon is willing to give it to me by tomorrow and so on. But again, we've lost out what used to be before the lockdown. So programming, some of you are programmers, some of you are hopefully computer scientists, some of you are kids students who have done some bit of bioinformatics in their college or school or degrees. So you know that when you did programming, if you ever did programming, it was about having some data, making some rules out of that data, and then watching the answers. So when you went in that direction, we called it programming. But in machine learning, it's a little bit, the direction changes. So you provide the answers and you provide the data, and what you get is the rules. So that's how machine learning is different from programming. To decomplex terminology, artificial intelligence on its own is any technique at all that enables computers to mimic human intelligence using logic. The most basic, game Minesweeper that you ever played when you were in the kindergarten, or if you're my kids and you're crazy about using my credit card on the Roblox or buying Robux or Minecraft or anything, or the PS4, all of that is AI. But machine learning is a subset of AI. Machine learning is that subset of AI where we use statistical techniques that enable machines to improve at a task that you're doing with some experience. We're going to talk about what tasks might mean, what experience might mean, what improving quote unquote might mean, and so on. And deep learning is a third status altogether, which is a subset again of machine learning. And deep learning includes algorithms that enable software that can train itself. So today we are only going to talk about the basics of machine learning. This is an introductory lecture. I hope to someday have an advanced AI lecture or advanced ML lecture in which I would like to talk to you about artificial neural networks and deep learning also. But today's talk is going to be extremely basic to get you started, like I said, to get your fingers dipped. AI, as I said, is everywhere. If you've been clicking photos of plants or flowers around you, if you've been thinking about drones that perform precision agriculture, if you're at Cambridge with me and we're thinking of a group on synthetic biology with biosignals from Markantia, or as was published last year in Science, a man who was completely paraplegic can now write with his mind. So handwriting with the mind is all about AI. This is a very, very nice picture where, where you can synthesize high quality images from text descriptions. It's usually not a very simple challenge for computer, but it's a vision issue. And by using stack generative adversarial networks, as shown over here, you can get photorealistic images which are entirely conditioned on text description. So for example, you just tell the machine, this flower has a lot of purple petals in a dome-like configuration, and you'll get something like this. Believe me, it's not as simple as just saying it, decomposing the hard problem. And this happens only by breaking things down or breaking the issue down into more manageable sub-problems through a sketch refinement process. On the rightmost side, you will see something that looks like a plumeria. This flower is white and yellow in color with petals that are wavy and smooth. I know a plumeria, it's one of my favorite flowers, but if you had given me that text, my brain computer would not have been able to think about the plumeria immediately, but the StatCan thought about it. So that's interesting. For those of you who are zoologists, think about the way the same thing can be done. This bird is red and brown in color with a stubby beak, and you find that a real looking, almost real looking bird comes in there. Similarly, this small bird has a white breast, light gray head, and black wings and tail and so on. And you see that this little bird on the right side is there. So AI in the Indian Agritech sector is extremely important. Last year, we'd had a big, of course, it was a brainstorming session where we brought together people from the Agritech sector and scientists in India. And this was funded by the Principal Scientific Advisor's Office. It was called the National Frontiers of Science meeting. And in fact, if you're part of the Indian National Young Academy of Science, I've been part of the INYAS for many years. We do the National Frontiers of Science meetings every year, where we bring together about 50 people from the technology sector and the research sector to come together and form collaborations or talk about their work and come up with new ideas over 3 days. So we lock you up in a nice place like a resort, and then we come back. What we get back out of it is a lot of collaborative grants, and it's almost like a writing retreat. It's really fun. Those of you who are not part of INYAS, think about joining it. Anyway, coming back, so digital agriculture currently, I'm in the agritech sector, so digital agriculture is currently driving transparency, traceability, and real-time access to information in India particularly, and there are many of these startups which you see, some of these you see listed over here. I encourage you to take a look at them and follow them up. All of this is available on the publicly released Agritech India NASSCOM Trends Analysis from July 2019. Similarly, AI has now become a frontier of science all over the world, and Indian companies particularly, so Indian youngsters, Indian youth are building these, are becoming fantastic entrepreneurs and startup leaders. And the Indian companies are increasingly looking at global markets to expand, not just in agritech. This is only the agritech sector, but it's happening even more so in the biomedical sector and the finance sector and so on. Machine learning and robotics also go hand in hand. There are many areas where robots are used. Some of you had mentioned robots when you were saying what comes up in your head and in the word cloud. It's true. It is true that industrial robots, military robots, and healthcare laboratory appliances are all being used for machine learning globally. So, basic stuff. What do you think when you say learning? What is learning? So any process by which a system, including yourself, can improve its performance from experience is known as learning. And there are two ways in which a system can improve. One is by acquiring new knowledge, which could be any fact and skills, and the other is by adapting your behavior by improving your accuracy or improving your efficiency. That means if you're doing a job, get better at the job. If you're doing a PhD, start writing some papers about getting your objectives finished sooner. So you adapt your behavior as to your known skills and with available facts, but do better. So that is another way you can improve. And this is exactly what we do when we think about machine learning or extrapolate the concept to machine learning. And what could be the task that you're doing? The task that you might be doing would be classification, it could be clustering, it could be solving a problem, any problem under the sun, or predicting something, okay? And what kinds of learning might there be? So I'm going to ask a question at the end of this. And one way of learning could be induction versus deduction. Another one could be what we do very much here in India, ratta lagao, quickly memorize, and you will know all the tables. It's a very good system. It's called rote learning. Works very well with kids. I don't know how much for grown-ups. Haven't tried. Then, of course, you could learn from teaching or from instructional. हाँ, 1 minute. बस यहाँ रख दीजिए, अभी मैं मीटिंग में हूँ. रखिए. साइन कराना अभी चाहिए. Okay, excuse me, I'll just take a, stretch yourself, stand up and take a short break. I'm going to put a signature on a file and give it back. आपका नाम है दीजिए. अमर जी, thank you very much. Goodbye. दरवाजा बंद कर दीजिए बाहर से ताकि. Okay, back now. Yeah, so please don't mind, this is going to happen. It's a working day and I'm in my office and I don't believe in silos between things. So I am a multitasker and you might find 15 other things going on. It's like you coming to my office and sitting with me and talking to me about machine learning. There will be 50 people coming in and going and I do not intend to apologize. So get up and find a glass of water or check your messages in between when I give you these breaks. Back to types of learning. Right, so one good way of learning is training yourself, acquisition of new knowledge or new skills, competence, as a result of teaching of these same things. So quite often when you go to Wikipedia or Wikimedia or Wikidata, which a lot of us are doing with my interns, of course, I'll come to the work we're doing with my interns, hopefully given time, and training requires scenarios or data or examples, and they'll have to be picked up from either yourself, your own group, or your friends, or public databases. Then you can learn by example or by practice. Now I'm going to talk to you about my work and you might find some of it interesting. You might want to work with me or you might want to start something of your own based on what I'm doing. And that is by learning from other people or learning by practice. Then you can learn by analogy. That's also a way of saying transfer learning. And then discovery learning. And can you think of any other ways? So if some of you can think of any other ways of learning, please type it in the chat box. And at the end of this talk, when I look at the chat box, I'll be able to comment on those also. So here are a couple of simple examples of defining a learning task. So essentially what we want the machine to do is to improve on that task, which we'll call T, with respect to a performance metric, which we're going to call P, based on experience or learning. So experience is going to be called E. The first example is playing chess. You might be playing chess at home, or you might want a machine to play chess, and it needs to improve on that task. So the task T is playing chess. And the performance metric, I'm sorry, the performance metric is the number of games or the percentage of games won against an arbitrary opponent. So the more games you win against your opponents, the better you get at it. So that's your performance metric P. And how do you get experience? By playing practice games against oneself. So I should say the machine can play with itself, or you can play with the machine, and so on, and you keep practicing. So by playing practice games, you might get some experience. The second example is recognizing handwritten words. In this case, the machine would be able to recognize handwritten words, and you would measure its performance metric P by the percentage of words which are correctly classified. And the experience will come from E, the database of human labeled images of handwritten words, which means that you would need a few words and you would need to know that these words are coming from a book from Shakespeare, these words are coming from a book from let's say Wilbur Smith, and these third set of words are coming from a book by Florence Nightingale, and so on. The third kind of example is where you make the task, which is categorizing email messages as spam or, of course, ham. And your performance metric would be percentage of the email messages correctly classified. And your E experience would be the database of emails, your emails, please, some with human given labels, or it could also be a much larger email database with human given labels as to what is spam and what is not. So once you have an idea about what the task is, what the performance metric is, what the experience is, you can then think about learning. So why should we do machine learning? First of all, there are several problems for which the existing solutions are either too difficult or too expensive, or they require a lot of manual effort. And these are called knowledge engineering bottlenecks. And that's why machine learning can come in and help you. The second reason you might want to do machine learning is to develop systems that can automatically adapt and customize themselves to individual users, or discover new knowledge, or do data mining as we're doing in the lab. The second thing is, why is it necessary? It's extremely necessary, of course, because learning is the hallmark of intelligence. A system that cannot learn is not intelligent. And without learning, everything is new. So you become extremely inefficient if you have to learn new things, if you pick up things every day as they come at face value. So you end up repeating lots of your mistakes. And the worst thing that you can do is to reinvent the wheel all the time. Then, why is learning possible? And this is the kind of question I usually put to the students when they're listening to, when I'm taking this lecture in a real world scenario. So learning is possible because there are regularities in the world, not always, but definitely quite a few for you to be able to build a machine learning classifier. So what kind of machine learning systems are there? Machine learning systems can be classified according to the amount and the type of supervision that they get during the training. So it's about somebody teaching the machine, and to what extent do you teach, and how much of that, how much of data is required for that. Essentially, there are four. I hope that Dhara or Gayatri have taken the poll, because now the answers are going to be there. There was a poll that I had asked them to take at the beginning of this this webinar, and all of you were asked to put in, type in an answer to the poll about machine learning systems. Either way, we're going to move on now. So the first, yeah, Gayatri, saying something.
Yeah, we can start it now. I mean, I missed.
Doesn't matter.
Okay, okay.
Maybe at the end if we have time. So let's see. In supervised learning, the first kind of, the most widely and commonly used kind of machine learning is supervised learning, where you have training data that you feed to the algorithm, and then you get the desired solution. But the training data that you feed to the algorithm has already something called labels. So you tell this is the data and this is the label on it. And a typical example is classifying ham or spam. You see the spam filter in each of your emails is a very good example. So it learns again and again from many emails for which this is spam, and you mark it as spam. And therefore, when a new email comes, it sees, does it look like that one which was marked as spam? And if yes, then it has been supervised or taught to learn the right way of distinguishing between spam and ham. The second kind of machine learning is unsupervised. Unsupervised is where you have no labels. Now, there is no, you get training data, but you don't get any labels, and the system learns without a teacher. So a typical supervised learning task is by clustering. So for example, say you have a huge amount of data about your blog's visitors. You want to run a clustering algorithm to detect a group of similar visitors. Like, am I having a lot of children visiting my site, or is it just school kids or college students, or is it principal investigators, group leaders, and so on? So at no point do you tell the algorithm which group a visitor belongs to. It has to find it itself, so without your help, and that's called unsupervised learning. The third kind of learning is semi-supervised learning, and some algorithms deal with partially labeled training data, in which there's huge amounts of unlabeled data and a little amount of labeled data, and this is called semi-supervised learning. The best example for this is the photo app in your phone. If you're an iPhone user like me, you would have a nice photo app which would have been like my photo app is full of 15,000 or 16,000 photos, and some of these I know are my children, some of my husband's. I have possibly put their names in one or two of them, but out of 17,000, in most cases, the machine doesn't know. The picture it has is from my contacts list, that this is my husband, this is what I call him, this is my son, this is my daughter. And you can see on the right side, then when I ask my phone to cluster the pictures by people, it has separated them. And not just the phone doesn't just know my husband who's a contact, this guy on the left side, but the phone also knows that I click the maximum numbers of photos of my daughter, and she doesn't like to be clicked. And then there's my son, there's myself, there's also my mother-in-law and my own mom, and there's my favorite little nephew. And it's amazing when you look at these things, how the phone knows. It might know about my husband. How does it know about my nephew? And it has classified him as a person, but of course it's doing it because it's using ML all the time. So once the phone has your family photos, it automatically recognizes that the same person X shows up in photos 1, 5, and 11. And you could have, like for my daughter, I'm hiding her face essentially, and yet the phone knows that it's her. And if you take a look at Millie's pictures, you'll find thousands of pictures, even if she's turning around. And if I'm catching her running, jumping, the phone knows that that's Millie each time. The last kind of machine learning is reinforced learning, and this is becoming extremely important these days. There would be a completely independent lecture that I could give on reinforced learning altogether, but I don't think I'm equipped to do that just now. Reinforced learning is a little different from the other three. The learning system is called an agent, and it can observe the environment and select and perform actions and get rewards in return, or otherwise penalties in the form of negative rewards. And therefore, the system learns what is the best strategy, called a policy. So it makes policies, and that policy is always chosen based on which policy gets the most rewards over time. And once you get this policy, or the policy, basically the policy defines what action the agent should choose when it's given in a given situation. The example that you might think about is a self-driven car. So a self-driven car is in the garage, and it switches on and moves ahead and hits the wall. And it learns, okay, this is not a good direction to move in. And then it moves backwards and so on. So there are lots of those games that we used to have in the olden times, where you had these multiple cars and you had to park them somewhere, and you would learn just by hitting around walls and hitting around each other what is the right thing to do. And that's called reinforced learning, and it is becoming extremely, especially in robotics, this is coming out to be the most handy kind of machine learning system. Now, between supervised and unsupervised ML, basically you have all of the machine learning that currently most biologists are doing, essentially me, myself, my colleagues, and a lot of us who are using genomic data, or let's say plant data or biomedical data, cancer data. We are doing supervised or unsupervised learning. Out of that also, we prefer to do supervised learning. Less often do we do unsupervised, but unsupervised has its own advantages, and these are very important for you to understand. The input data for a supervised machine learning technique is where algorithms are always trained using labels. So input data will always have labels. This is a patient, this is a non-patient. This is the gene structure of the protein that was in the patient. This is the gene structure of the gene that was in the regular individual, in the normal person, and so on, or the wild type plant, and so on. And unsupervised machine learning techniques are used against data which is not labeled. The computational complexity, obviously, the computational complexity of the unsupervised learning is much more than that of the supervised learning, which is a simpler method. And whenever we take these courses, now I'll talk about a one-day course in machine learning that I usually take, and I've been taking for years and years, in real scenario, not yet online, where after giving this 1 hour talk, which I am giving to you today, we do a supervised learning example. I mean, you just use your machines and you're in front of me, and we do a supervised learning together. So it's so easy that you would probably pick it up in the next 2 hours if we have 2 hours to spend together. And then of course, accuracy becomes an issue. Which is more accurate? Obviously, the supervised machine learning is more accurate than the unsupervised machine learning. So entirely overall, there are 3 stages of machine learning. The first one is you build a hypothesis and you say, okay, can I do this? Can I separate or distinguish these two things? Can I find a pattern? Can I do a prediction? You make your hypothesis and you get the data relevant to that. The second stage is you do your training or the machine learning in one of the 4 types that I told you about just now. And the last stage is to test your classifier or find a generalization from the patterns that you found. So how do you do this testing or accuracy testing? Firstly, you evaluate the performance by testing on data that has not been used for training. I typed it out wrong. You evaluate the performance by testing on data not used for training. So both should be randomly sampled, of course. And then, of course, you have cross-validation methods for smaller data sets, and the more data, the better. But please don't forget that little bracket in between. The more relevant data, the better. And which brings me to the entire topic of featureization altogether. What features of a certain question or a subject or a theme would you use, and how would you select the right features or the right number of dimensions and so on? We will speak about it a little more given time. How well did the system perform is the question, which allows you to generalize it and check its performance on unseen or unknown scenarios or data, as well as brittle versus robust performance. For supervised machine learning classifiers, classification is the process of predicting the class of the given data points. The classes are sometimes called targets or labels or categories, and we like to be able to say X or Y. In binary cases, it's the simplest. Is it belonging to X or not? Does this patient have cancer or not? Do I have COVID or not? And so on. Classification predictive modeling is the task of approximating a mapping function F, which you're talking about, from input variables which have been given to you to discrete output variables Y, yes or no, which would be the answer or the outcome or the decision. And the classification algorithms can be dependent on the application and the nature of the available data set. These usually come in 4 or 5 different flavors, which are listed over here. You could have decision trees, naive Bayes, you would have artificial neural networks, k-nearest neighbors, random forests, and support vector machines. More often than not, students find themselves starting out with random forests and support vector machines. But when you have to evaluate a classifier, there are various ways of evaluating it. And I have always said one thing, and I keep insisting upon it: don't use one method, try and use multiple methods. So you could use the holdout method, you could use the cross-validation method. In a holdout method, basically you're holding out one set. So you partition your data into 2 pieces. Essentially, the larger piece should be for your training, which is usually about 80%, and the remaining 20%, you hold it out and keep it separate. And then you say, okay, based on 80%, I've learned this is spam and that is ham. This 20%, can I do it right? How would you know whether you've done it right? Because you already have the class labels, right? Similarly, cross-validation. Cross-validation is slightly different because it helps you to test overfitting. And a lot of biological data, students forget that you may be overfitting your model. And therefore, cross-validation makes random subsets. So like we made 2 partitions for the holdout method. You could make 10 partitions or 8 partitions or 20 partitions of your data, depending upon how much data you have. And randomly, the cross-validation protocol is going to make k subsets, and then it will iterate the learning process on each one of those k subsets. So every time, it will iterate the learning process on k-1 subject. So each time, in each iteration, k-1 would be used as training, and 1 would be used as the holdout method, and so on. And then, of course, you measure your relevance by using the precision recall curves. Some students do the receiver operating characters ROC curves, but I have been saying for some time, especially for genomics data, you need to look at the BRAFC curves. For unsupervised machine learning algorithms, these are unsupervised learning problems are further grouped into clustering and association problems. There are 2 ways this can be done. Now, remember, in unsupervised learning, you have no labels on your data. So you would get 10,000 emails together and say, now tell me which is spam and which is ham. So you would have to first see, do some emails look similar to each other? Do others don't? So you do clustering. There are various ways of doing clustering. I have a 1-hour lecture usually, which I take only on clustering. So clustering can be exclusive, where you partition the data. When you've done ENCODE, if any of you have done ENCODE, you know that each data point in your data set can belong to exclusively one cluster. But there are also agglomerative clustering methods in which each data itself becomes a cluster. So it's kind of a hierarchical clustering system. And there could also be overlapping clusters where each point may belong to 2 or more clusters, very unlike the exclusive or partitioning kind of clustering. So in overlapping, which is more like fuzzy C-means kind of a business, where you have separate degrees of belonging, so degrees of membership. One particular node may belong to cluster 1, but it may also to 20% belong to cluster 2. and this is used more often in the RNA-seq kind of NGS data sets when we're doing clustering with them, if you've done the WGCNA, for which I take another. Anyway, so probabilistic clustering is the last kind of clustering where you use a probability distribution function to create a cluster. Association is separate from clustering. Association allows you to establish association amongst data objects inside large databases. And the unsupervised technique is about discovering interesting relationships between these variables in very large data sets. So for example, you have a subgroup of cancer patients, which are grouped by their gene expression measurements. And you have also groups of shoppers, like I said, like me and my husband, based on their browsing and purchasing histories or Netflix binge watching histories and so on. So you associate those people and associate those data points, and you start from the first and start expanding them. And when the association doesn't work, you still get the clusters. So that's about it for today. We are at the 51st. I think we're almost touching the 1 hour, but there are many flavors of ML, and I so want to talk about featureization, especially for biologists. And I think if Shailesh will allow, I would like to take 10 minutes to just talk about, how you convert data into vector features or vectorization of biological sequences, especially when you start out with a set of amino acids. If those of you who have access to the chat box, have you thought about how your amino acid sequence may be converted to a vector for you to be running any kind of machine learning on the biology data? Or in my case, if you want to join me for a PhD student, I expect you to know some chemistry. And if you've got chemical compounds, let's say you have 10,000 100 to start with, chemical compounds. Do you know how you could convert them to vectors? You can't just use their names and start doing a machine learning on those. And then, of course, how would these amino acids and the features that you extract out of them allow you to select the right kind of features? So for amino acids, I'm happy to answer, because of shortage of time, I'm happy to tell you directly that you can't use the 20 digits or the 20 characters of the language of protein chemistry. You can't just say these are the 20 amino acids and so each one will become a feature. You can't, because of course, each is the chemical. Each is on its own a chemical compound and has properties which are similar to others. So there are clusters within the amino acids. So you know which ones are hydrophobic, which ones are electrostatic, and so on. And the polar ones go separate. And therefore, feature selection would involve not just the name, it would indeed need the name of each or the ID or the single digit ID of each amino acid, but also the class it belongs to. In addition, you would need to have a feature to incorporate what is the order of these amino acid sequences. You just can't say A, C, T, A, C, and T, and P are there in my sequence. They come in an order, and that order, the pairwise order and the backwards pairwise order with a small window in between, would be extremely important. And so on. You can come up with hundreds and hundreds of, like my PhD student Archana got 352 vectors for a single amino acid sequence. So then you're deluding yourself, like you've bored yourself with so many features. Are all of them equally important in trying to identify whether that amino acid or that sequence belongs to a certain class? We were trying to run, a prediction of a certain class, which of the proteins which we couldn't find in the plant kingdom and so on. But so many features, which ones are correct, which ones are unimportant? So discarding them, that is the curse of dimensionality. Are all the 365 dimensions important? And how do you decide they're not important? And that is where the complication of ML comes in. So in machine learning projects, we usually select a learning algorithm and train it on some data. The things that can go wrong are related to 1, bad algorithms, and 2, bad data. What do you mean by bad data? Which is more important than bad algorithms, because you can always change the parameters and change the algorithm and test a different classifier and test a different clustering mechanism. It's all at this click of it's very, very much simple. But bad data is your problem. First of all, bad data might be it's insufficient data. You don't have enough information to be able to decide whether or not you can classify something, or non-representative data, incomplete data. You want to talk about all states of India and you have information representing only 10 states of India. How would that be representative of India? So that's bad. Overfitting data, when you try to force fit to use the, to match the use case with you, or underfitting data, when the data, when it's too simple, the data you're providing is too simple to account for variance. All of these can happen, and these are all related to bad data. And so you need to look at your data and discuss with somebody all the time what might have gone wrong with your ML effort. The limitations of machine learning are that, first of all, you need to obtain sufficiently large data sets. If we had the time, and if I could talk to you about my own case study, I would tell you how we increase the number of chemicals that we are trying to study the silent language of plants. And what we need is how plants talk to each other through chemicals. And what we need for that is to try and know how many chemicals are there. And so we need to sufficiently get large data sets, and then the need to label the training data and label it right. And the difficulty explaining results from large, complex neural network-based systems is a major limitation of machine learning. There are also other difficulties and risks of discrimination and bias, and there are lots of privacy concerns about data, especially if it's biomedical data or human data and so on. As a plant scientist, I've not had these privacy concerns, but as a scientist, you might be, you might be a biomedical researcher, you might be wanting to get into cancer genetics and genomics or anything else. Be careful about privacy concerns always before starting an ML experiment. Data quality, quantity, and completeness, without question, most important. And so,
sorry to intervene, Yadav. We have 20 minutes.
15 minutes?
20 minutes, 20 minutes.
20 minutes, may say 15 minutes for questions and 5 minutes for me. Is that okay?
Yeah, you can take 10 minutes out of 20.
Really? Thank you so much. And I'm sorry for going longer and longer. I tend to go into discussions.
No issues, no issues.
Okay. So the word of caution that I want to leave everybody with over here is that artificial intelligence is good, but it is no match for natural stupidity. So don't just jump into it without knowing what it is, but it's extremely important to start in the right way. And I can tell you where and how to start. So before that, there are certain points that I'd like you to ponder on. First of all, how will it affect information science, particularly now in the times of the pandemic? And then, of course, is it needed in all the problems? Do you have questions in your PhD, in your work, where ML is really needed? Quite often I find students don't need to do it, but they still do it thinking that unless they do it, their science will not be as jazzy as their peers is. Don't give in to peer pressure. Think first whether you need ML in your problem or not. And then again, nearly all ML today is still human guided. Where do you aspire to in the future? Where do you think it's going to go ahead? These are a couple of textbooks and resources that I'd like you to use. Software, Vika, #1, and if you want to think about where you want to begin data science, as I said earlier, pick up our now, if not now, yesterday. So that's how it is. There are lots of online resources for beginners, which if you want, you can go to. There's the Data Carpentry, which has certain pre-courses on stats and Unix skills also. But the best thing that I have personally found, and when I take this one-day course for machine learning, what we do is Vika. Vika is absolutely a fabulous place for somebody who is even a graduate. You're a graduate student, you're sitting at home, you're just listening to my lecture, and now you're getting bored because it's reaching 1 hour. But you have time later tonight, you have an hour with you, and you want to start with some little bit of data. Somebody's data, anything will do, but you want to do it yourself. Go to Vika and then see how they do things. But of course, if you already know a little bit of R, there are several packages in R, all of which are very good for you to start your machine learning work. But before that, please do R for data skills. So this is a winter school that I'm planning to do in December for 3 days. If things work out, if we get the funds, of course. And then if we can do a full on, 8 hours a day, and you sit with me and we look at the data together, and you have your machine and I have my machine, and I keep looking at your code and I tell you how to do, then things can work out much better. So this is the course that we do, and this is more about Vika, and it explores machine learning as a tool for analysis of biological questions. We start with the same talk that I have given to you today, and we cover the basic concepts of ML in the first part, as I have done already, and we discuss the practical considerations of its use in data mining. I've done that. So the entire course is a mix of lectures and practical. So then at this stage, if we were having the regular one-day course, I would take 2 hours to do this thing with you. So this is basically an example with Vika, which was developed by Emmanuel Vishek and his team in 2013. It's fabulous entirely. So you do supervised machine learning using DNA barcodes. So you do a classification using DNA barcodes, and because we are not doing this course entirely, it doesn't mean that you don't get to do it. If you go to this website, or if you just type in or Google out the course material. All of it is free. You're more than welcome to try yourself tonight, tomorrow, this weekend. So what you will get is this part, which I've done already, the introduction to the concepts of machine learning. But I would like you, then the course itself will introduce you to Vika. You will prepare your own input data. You will evaluate more than 5 classifiers, and then you will interpret and visualize your results, all of this together. And this is again an example of the blog which Vishek and his team has developed. I think this is fantastic, and we could really have a 2-hour or 3-hour session in which we could do it stepwise if we had a more clear infrastructure of being able to, my being able to teach you on a regular basis and so on. But try it yourself, it's fantastic. And there's lots of fun stuff you can do with the deep mind and playing piano with the AI and so on. My case study is for phytochemistry, and there's a lot of deep learning that we've been doing with plant chemistry. There are more than 50,000 unique biochemicals which are produced by plants that are not required for their growth or development. So what is it that they're doing there? We capture the emission profiles, we study terpene synthesis, we build species distribution models. Essentially, my science is at the interface of botany, chemistry, and geography. And like I said, I'm looking for a PhD student right now to take this up for this year. This on the right side, you see the master's thesis of my first student at Cambridge, Ewan Salter. He pulled out insights using ML based on this analysis of the essential oil database that my India PhD students, Sangeeta and Piyush, had developed over several years. And what we found was there is alteration in terpene profiles within and between plants, and it could be defined by the stages, by parts, by conditions, as well as geography, where a plant grows, where it prefers to be, and how it's interacting with the ecological environment around it and so on. So there's a lot of work that Priya and Sangeeta have done over the years, but now we're beginning to, because with Priya and Sangeeta, we were able to set this data. We were able to handle the issue of getting enough data. So we've got 150,000 records and increasing. In addition, with Ewan's help at Cambridge, we've been able to think about how we would like this ML classifier to be, what we would call it when we get it ready. And now I'm just waiting for a couple of new students to join me, both at Cambridge and here in India, to be able to expand this work further. Our entire aim is to get more emission data and develop learning classifiers based on that emission data. And here we are looking at chemistry. So you have to also understand that to convert chemicals into feature vectors, you've got to think about the atoms that are in that chemical, every single atom. And so you go around taking Morgan fingerprints, which was again something that I didn't know till just 3 years ago, when my own PhD mentor and friend, Devashish Mohanty, told me about it, and his PhD student was using it. And then I realized it's fantastic. You can convert, we always did, even as in my PhD 15 years ago, we used to be converting chemicals into Smiles codes. It's good to have a Smiles code, but the Smiles code basically just tells you the atoms, and it doesn't tell you how they're connected to each other. The Morgan fingerprints are able to tell you at every level, depending on the radius you choose for the Morgan fingerprint, you can have a vectorization of your chemical compound. But we need it from literature. And can machines curate open phytochemistry literature? This is where my Cambridge colleagues came into the picture, and we've been doing a lot of things together. Last year, some of our work was published when Carl Malamud from the Public Resource came out to help us with data mining. And then we have this fantastic expanded mentorship program during the coronavirus pandemic, where we've been joined by the INIAS, the Department of Science and Technology, Rajasthan, and the 3 science academies. If you want to join this, and if you're a computer scientist, you're more than welcome to join us. I won't go into these slides. I think I would like to close my talk right now, but I have to talk about my intern, Ambereen. She's from Kashmir, and she's built this whole story together, and it's a complete different presentation and YouTube presentation, but I've kept a couple of her slides here to tell you how well all of these students from diverse backgrounds, some of them even without high-end workstations, just with mobile phones, have been able to join us and do science with us. And we've been extracting knowledge from literature together in India at the UK interface by scraping, cleaning, annotating. And the best part about our work is that we do it in the open. All of our work is on GitHub. All of our lab meetings are happening bi-weekly, and the reports are open, and so on. We practice what we preach, and I'd like you to do that too. With that, thank you very much for listening. I've taken too long. Shailesh, thanks to everybody in your team for inviting me here.
Thank you, Dr. Gitanjali.